Hello, everyone. My name is Matty Mills. I'm very excited to be able to bring you this panel tonight as part of the Queer Screen Mardi Gras Film Festival. Before we kick things off, I'd love to do an acknowledgement of country. I'd like to acknowledge the Dharawal people of the Eora Nation. They're one of 29 clans. I'd like to pay my respects to their elders, both past and present, and extend that respect to everybody tuning in this evening. I'd like to specifically extend that respect to all First Nations people and to the deadly mob who are joining us on this panel tonight. I'm really excited because this lineup is unlike anything I've done before. These mob are incredibly talented and are guns at everything they do in their field. First of all, I'd like to introduce Mitchell Stanley, who recently produced Warwick Thornton's documentary television series, The Beach. His first feature film, We Are Still Here, a multi-protagonist anthology feature film, is set to be released later this year. Welcome, Mitch.
Thanks for having me, Matty. Really appreciate it. Great to be here.
Next up, we have B. Cruse, a Yuin, Biripi and Wiradjuri storyteller and one of the first drag kings, Indigenous drag kings. It's pretty epic. Welcome, B.
Thanks, Matty.
They're lovely to see you. I love those flags behind you. Lots of pride in that room.
Yeah, had to.
Next up, we have Aboriginal and Pinoy Irish bi woman, Laurrie. Hey, Laurrie, how you doing?
Hi, great to be here.
So lovely to have you. Up next, and our final guest on the panel is Davey Thompson, and most of you will probably know him from his most recent work, All My Friends Are Racist. Welcome, Davey.
G'day, and thanks for having me.
Of course. I'm super excited, guys. This is such an honor and a pleasure to be amongst you mob. We're here in Mardi Gras Film Festival. It's Mardi Gras season. It's a time to celebrate. Queer First Nation stories, come sort of few and far between, really, when it comes to the grand scheme of cinema. But tonight we're going to unpack that. We're going to talk about the challenges, but also about the success and the pride that comes with Queer First Nation stories. I'm going to kick things off by asking you, Mitch. Look, you've been in the game a fair while now. You own your own company and you're a multi-award-winning producer. What sets Queer First Nation stories apart from other stories?
Thanks for throwing to me first, Matty. What we do, particularly for their Indigenous films, from the ground up, and starting with people like Laurrie, we find Indigenous people to create the concepts and start writing that way as Aboriginal filmmakers ourselves. And I think that gives a level of authentication that is sometimes missed out of other queer films that are sometimes written for a queer audience that include queer characters but don't actually come from queer people. It's something that not just being homosexual but being a black fella, we adopt very early on when we're working with agencies. It's something we pride ourselves on, particularly with the Indigenous department at Screen Australia, and I believe Davey, you were part of that team, and now at Film Vic. I think that is what sets the bar and sets it different. Not to say that all filmmakers in queer film don't do that, but I just know that it is something that we adopt very early on, and that continues to flow throughout the filmmaking process, throughout the development, production, post-production, casting. That is something we do a lot of. I can't say all, but a lot of us pride ourselves on.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned that relationship between the agencies. Laurrie, I'll ask you, what are some of the fundamental challenges when trying to get a Queer First Nation film or concept off the ground?
Yeah, I think, there are plenty. Historically, we can see that there is a great degree of exclusion that we have seen for queer and trans mob, for First Nations people generally. So I think when we look at things, just getting people in the door, in the room, getting experience on set, whether it be specifically First Nations or queer or trans content. We need to see First Nations queer folk getting experience, and that can be a big challenge. And I think a lot of that stems from the fact that, you know, we have grown up perhaps not seeing ourselves represented, so we don't think this is for us. And I certainly really wasn't quite sure where I was going to land when I was aiming for a quote unquote career. So I find myself incredibly lucky to be where I am right now, but it shouldn't just be up to luck. It should really just be a really equitable playing field where everyone gets a chance to work and hone on their craft. And the other thing I think that is a challenge is finding understanding in a sector that has historically and to a degree presently been geared towards excluding you can be a really tricky thing, because if you're First Nations and you're wanting to work with queer people generally in the industry, you may not have that understanding and vice versa. So to find a place of understanding for both of those intersections, I think can be really tricky.
Thanks, Laurrie. Talking about, you know, honing your craft and working on your skill, I want to jump to you, B, and I would love to understand your storytelling ability, especially the aspect of, you know, being a drag king. How did this come about? When did it come to life? And I'd love to know a little bit about it.
Well, basically, I'm a jack of all trades. Like, I work across film, television, and theatre. I do a bit of writing. I'd love to do a bit more directing. I didn't think that was a skill set I had, but I've fallen into producing as well, and acting. So I call myself a storyteller, A, because I don't like all the slashes, but B, because culturally it's my role. My great auntie Iris Clayton was a storyteller of our family. She's written poems and books, and there's stuff like in the museums that she's written and stuff, you know. So one of the last times I connected with her was when I was about 12 years old, and she said that I was going to be the storyteller of our family.
Wow.
You don't understand the weight of those words as a young kid, especially a little stubborn black kid like I was. But then, I don't know, I just became an adult and I was a bit flamboyant, a bit different, a bit queer, a bit here and there. And I got in with Rachel Perkins, and once I had her on my resume, it was amazing. Like, people wanted to mentor me. I think I got into the industry, the arts, when I was about 18 or 19 or something. But my mum was friends with a lot of cool artists like yourself, Mitch. I've known Mitch since I was like a little punk ass teenager. And it's people like Mitch Stanley and the Penny Smallacums of the world that kind of molded me into being the filmmaker that I am, to being the storyteller that I am. You know, they've given me great constructive criticism since I was a young person. Mm-hmm. I don't always agree with them, of course, but that's what they're there for. They're supposed to help you along the way. They're supposed to, you know, I don't know, be the arrow, the spear, be the arrow of the spear, you know. And I guess I love following in their shoes, and that's why I work across so many different mediums, is because I don't want to be limited in my storytelling capacity. I want, if a young person comes up to me and says, "Hey sis, I noticed that you've done a couple of things in film. I've got this yarn. I'd like to pitch it to a producer or pitch it to a company, or hey, do you want to direct it?" You know, I don't want to limit myself in what I can do for not only myself and my stories that I hold, but for other mob out there, you know, young and old. Yeah, if you're queer, if you're black, if you're a young woman like I am, like, I'm ticking so many damn boxes, but that shouldn't be a factor in us not having a go, you know?
Absolutely. And you know, you're so multifaceted. It's epic just to explore that with you. Now, Davey, look, a lot of First Nations stories in our country, they actually sit well with our audiences, or, you know, get a big response. Sometimes when it comes to queer First Nation stories, it's not the same. but with all my friends are racist, your most recent project, it seems like it did hit a chord with, you know, a big audience. How was it like for you to be a part of this? And what was it like living that, you know, flamboyant fantasy?
Well, you're not wrong. We definitely did resonate with our audience. We heard back from the ABC that, you know, we really hit the demographic right in the sweet spot, and we had really strong viewer numbers throughout every episode. So that was it was a really exciting time. And so to like sort of get that affirmed through some data, that was also really cool. But coming onto the project, I was really nervous. I hadn't really acted in a long time. I'd focused a lot more on producing and, you know, the back end of the arts. But the scripts were just so fun and exhilarating that I just threw myself at it. And I remember there was a moment reading the scripts on the bus on the way home and just cracking up laughing like really, really hard. And I hadn't had that from a script in a long time. So I knew I had to do it. And so, yeah, being there, filming that, having my co-star Tully there, she was fantastic to work with. And, you know, having a Black director, a queer Black writer, it meant the difference for us on set. We felt safe and supported and allowed to really push as many boundaries as we could really. It was great.
Yeah, and you can see that. You can see that there was definitely queer creatives at the helm. It obviously, you know, started with queer creatives. Laurrie, I want to ask you, when it comes to pitching a queer story, queer First Nation story, how important is it that you have from the bottom up queer creatives on the project? And is that something you look for when processing for funding?
Yeah, definitely. So for those viewing that don't know, I work at Screen Australia's First Nations department. So I was co-manager on All My Friends Are Racist and read the scripts from development through to production. And particularly within my own department, the writer and director have to be First Nations. So that is a mandate for the funding, which I think is really important. But generally, I think it's super important to have queer First Nations ownership throughout the whole process, from the very inception right through to marketing and delivery. I think it's super important to have that kind of authenticity right the way through, because, I mean, we're going to know what's going to work for our community better than anyone else. I think there's this misconception that, you know, you can learn certain things from degrees, and don't get me wrong, like I've done degrees, but it really, lived experience is what is going to give you the edge. And I think that was really evident in All My Friends Are Racist. That the team had lived it. They knew the story, they knew the audience, and they knew how to get there. And for me, definitely, when I assess something, you know, we assess on the basis of the team and their appropriateness to execute a particular concept. For me, that's not just film experience. That's not just prior experience in that role, although that is important. I think the lived experience, the connection to what the concept is, also becomes a really key factor in determining the success of that project.
Mm-hmm. I love that. It's and obviously, like, that is absolutely, plus, you know, Davey's incredible talent. But that, you know, is the key, is fundamentally why that project, you know, was a success. You could absolutely see that the bones of it were authentic. Now, Mitch, I want to ask, you know, you've been producing for a while now. You're multi-award winning producer. When you were younger, and when you were, you know, young queer Mitch, growing up, was there anything that truly inspired you in terms of queer First Nation stories, or was it you couldn't see them? You didn't have, I suppose, those in front of you.
Well, growing up, I didn't actually see queer First Nation stories. I saw queer films, and I saw First Nations films. I don't actually remember a queer blackfellow film or First Nations from anywhere else around the world. I mean, my inspiration come from being an actor. I trained as a kid and younger in my teens at acting school, and from there I fell into producing. But meanwhile, working with agencies, the Screen New South Wales and NITV and Foxtel. So yeah, the inspiration comes from in front of the camera, and I think it's really important now, knowing the other side, that it's not just what you see in front of the camera. You also need to ensure the representation is behind the camera. And I guess this is one for Davey and B. Like, is it? I think actors feel a bit more comfortable when they see a few more Indigenous people on the other side, kind of getting where they're going and supporting them on that side of the camera. But that's more of a question for you two guys, because I haven't been acting for a very long time.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to ask you, B. Does that resonate with you?
Absolutely, like, because I feel like I've played a couple of little token things here and there, you know, like it's like, oh, we need a black fella, we need a bit of diversity. Let's chuck B in there. She can blend, you know, and it's like, oh shit. You know, I would have liked to have explored my character a little bit more. I would have liked to have helped in the writing process of it, you know. There's just so many little intricacies that if I come to a script that's written by a white person, and that white person, or non-Indigenous person, I should say, doesn't understand where I'm coming from, I get conflicted and it makes me feel yuck. Mm-hmm. And then I turn around and ask the producer, I'm like, hey, can I have a chat about the script? And then I'm the black fella that doesn't want to run along with the team, you know?
Difficult one.
And it's always the same stuff. But then you work with someone like Mitch, and you work with the black producers in Australia to tell these black stories and to start telling these queer stories. Because much like Mitch, I don't remember, like as a young queer person, I just don't remember both black and queer. I think the first depiction of First Nation queer anything was because my mum brought back this CD when she was working at NITV, and it was, I think, a series called Moccasined Flats of First Nation American, and just about the reserve. And there was this hot cop, and I'm like, oh, I hope she's gay. And then it turns out she's gay, and I'm like, far out. My mind was just blown. Yeah. I was like, there are other black queer people like me. And it was just such a, like, I'm getting goosebumps thinking about it, you know. But I was in my late teens when I found that. Mm-hmm. And I get into acting, and I push the line. Like, I tell these white producers where it's at, and it's like, if they want me to come in at the last minute, I tell them I'm not going to be no little lackey jump on their project at the last minute. Yeah. Because I've done some consultation work, and you've got to put your foot down. There's these big companies out there that want to poach our stories and take that right away from us. Like, we're the oldest nation, oldest peoples in the world, you know, and storytelling is how we've kept our sanity, our blood going, you know. It's a part of our culture. And then these white fella companies come in with their white fella producers, and they're like, oh, we want to hold the rights to your story. And it's like, no, you're not going to do that, you know. And I think that's why I had to get into producing a little bit, just to understand and kind of hold the line like that, you know. Mm-hmm. That's my experience. How's your experience, Davey, with being an actor and, I guess, holding the line, pushing the limits with these white fellas, I guess?
Yeah, I've been very fortunate. Just about every production I've been involved in has had black fellas left, right and centre on it. You typically been behind the scenes on these, but in All My Friends Are Racist, just having black fellas in our crew, like not only the director and writers, but, you know, we had crew members who were First Nations. That was an extra edge for me, because the director and the writer really let me go wild with a few ad-libs, and just having other black fellas in the room was great, because I had our community there that I could just throw these really niche, stupid jokes at, and for them to laugh, it's like, okay, there we go. All right. Yeah. I don't have to worry about what the Second Nations mob think about my jokes. If the First Nations mob are laughing, I'm good.
I love that. That's amazing. I totally can see that as well. You know, it's that whole aspect of community. Laurrie, I want to ask you, when it comes to, you know, getting a project at the really the start of a project, how important is it to ensure that down the track there's going to be some safe spaces, especially when it comes to set, and how do you implement that?
It's a really hard question, and I think, I mean, I've had to interrogate the notion of safe space, because I think anytime we're sharing space, there is an inherent possibility for there to be a lack of safety. Anytime we're meeting people who don't inherently understand where we're coming from, whether it be from a First Nations or a queer perspective, anytime we're expected to educate, that there is kind of a possibility for there to be a lack of safety. Unfortunately, I think we're kind of at the start of things, particularly for the intersection of both First Nations and queer. As the panelists have also demonstrated, we don't have a lot of those examples historically. I think we're at a really exciting point where we're seeing more queer First Nation stories and those intersections building together. And I think it's up to the people who are helming these projects and productions. But when I was thinking about this panel and what I thought were the opportunities, I think it's about putting queer First Nations people in positions of power. Mm-hmm. And that's how we change the dial. So being a decision maker myself, that's a position of power. And that enables me to demand that certain things be put in place when I'm managing a project. And that might be, there needs to be a First Nations queer producer, or, you know, there needs to be someone who can speak to the queer audience when it's going out. There are many different ways of, to quote Penny, there are many ways to skin a cat. And I think it is really dependent on the project and the people, but definitely readjusting the way power is distributed is how we're going to ensure things are safer.
Mm-hmm. Great, totally agree with you. And you know, who else to quote but other than Penny Smallacone?
Can I add to that too, Laurrie? I mean, I guess there is a lack of diversity with people in those positions, and it's then the responsibility, I find, of producers. And you do hear a lot of producers say, well, I can't get a head of department that's queer, or I can't get a head of department that's Indigenous. But that's then therefore their opportunity to ensure that they attach people, you know, aspiring to be in those positions in the future, and to have them trained up and have them on set, because we won't be in this position forever. I mean, us filmmakers and, you know, people in the offices such as Davey and Laurrie, we are ensuring that training is instilled upon our people. And I think, me personally, with other producers, I'd like to see them to adopt the same attitude.
Mm-hmm. Mitch, I'd like to ask you, you know, you haven't specifically, or have you, you correct me, worked on or produced First Nation queer content, have you?
I have, Trans Black. So we had done that for which anniversary was it? For Mardi Gras with the ABC. And we were trying to get it, you know, work out the broadcast times in conjunction with Sydney Queer Film and Melbourne Queer Film, and unfortunately it was going to air before then. But you know, it did well overseas with Frameline in San Francisco, Singapore, and in Europe. But that was a while ago. That feels like it's ancient news. I haven't done a queer film. Done films that have been perceived as queer, but no, not a queer.
I wanted to ask you: is there a difference, you know, working with queer people and queer First Nations people and non-queer people? Do you prefer it?
Well, it depends on the project. It's suited. I mean, as I said, I would prefer, you know, queer people tell queer stories, and definitely Indigenous people tell Indigenous stories. Mm-hmm. If it didn't come from Indigenous queer people, I wouldn't say it's an Indigenous queer film. Might be starring Indigenous queer people. So it's a different lens. Like, how do you look at it?
Yeah, absolutely.
You got to compare apples with apples.
Now, I want to throw a little spanner in the works, and I want to get your take on this, but I'm sure I know the answer. B, I'm going to throw it to you first. Do you think that queer roles should only be played by queer actors?
Yes.
Yeah. I'm sure
Pretty controversial in these times, but it's like, it's 2022. There's so many like different shades of the rainbow tree. Like, come on, you know. And I hate when people turn around and, like, mostly white producers turn around and say, "Oh, can we get a darker black fella?" It's like there's some weird miscommunication, I don't know. There's something missing in that, you know. And people need to educate themselves. They need to open their eyes, because there's so many different kinds of queer. There's so many different kinds of, like, shades of black, you know. Don't just sit in your little bubble and think that that's the entire world, and then turn around and say, "Oh, I need a bit of diversity to get this funding. I'm going to chuck this storyline in and be all trendy and shit." And then, you know, find some token fella to play that role at the last minute, you know. I've been down that road so many times and I'm sick of it.
Yeah.
And it's, yes, I agree. Queer and black mob need to be playing queer and black characters.
Absolutely. Could not agree more. Now, Laurrie, I just want to ask you, do you think, you know, you come from an agency that provides support and funding to projects, do you think that there should be a quota when it comes to getting queer First Nation films up off the ground?
Hard question, again. Controversial opinion. I don't think there should be quotas. Firstly, statistically, we don't know what the demographic of queer people look like, unfortunately. We were not included in the ABS. I had the unfortunate experience of not being able to disclose my gender, which was, you know, not fun the first time around. But then I was one of, I think, 250 people where they, like, called up and double checked. And then I had to, like, reconfirm my assigned sex to a stranger. Anyway, that's a different tangent. But we don't have an accurate picture of what queerness looks like in Australia. So to administer quotas would be stabbing in the dark. The other risk with administering quotas is tokenization. By saying we need X amount of queer projects, that runs the risk of, I mean, firstly, as I think B mentioned, you know, we're going to have established production companies going, "Oh, I can hit that quota with this story and this person I've plucked out of nowhere that I'm not going to give any rights to." And I think it also runs the risk of not allowing for queer First Nations people to, you know, take their journey at their time. I was very lucky to learn very early on that you don't get a first chance at making a TV series or a film. So if you don't do it excellently the first time, you will be judged on that basis. This is a tough sector. This is a small sector within an even smaller sector. So to undertake something, you need to do it at the right time. And so that takes nurturing people and allowing them and their stories to flourish at the right time. And by saying and demanding you need to do X, Y, Z by this time based on quotas, I don't think it's doing the justice that our communities deserve.
Great. Really
and
great.
I'd love to just add that, yeah, it does incentivize production companies to really pump out content, but often it will be mediocre, really, just to meet that quota. And the other risk also with having quotas is that if those quotas aren't met, it's also a justification for the government to cut funding to those quotas. And we're fighting hard enough as it is in the existing funding pools. So yeah, there'd be more money going to other projects that don't need it. And it creates a bit of an imbalance.
Yeah, absolutely agree with you, Davey. I want to stick with you and change the pace a little bit here, but ask you, you know, you've been in front of the camera, you've been behind the camera. What do you enjoy more, and sort of what have been some of the highlights for you?
Oh, geez. Acting is really, really hard. It's a lot of fun. It is a lot of fun, but it's really, really hard. I, put my everything into that. But it's the same with being behind the camera. I think it depends on the project and what's required of me. Like if it's a really fun, silly thing as an actor, then yeah, I'll definitely jump in. That's always the more fun thing. But when it comes to something more intense and serious, I love not to have that focus on me because it is so hard to be an actor. So I'd rather have my focus behind the camera and, sort of help coax through what's happening in the scene, really. Just sort of be there and support everyone. They both have their highs and lows, definitely.
Awesome. Good to know. Good to know. B, I want to jump to you now. Do you think that representation, the idea of representation of First Nations and queer people has changed and is changing, or do you think that it's sort of stuck in a rut?
If you asked me this question a few months ago, I probably would have said it's a bit in a rut. But then I saw this really awesome show called All My Friends Are Racist.
I think I saw that one.
No, it's a slow progression, I feel. Mitch could probably speak to this a bit more. But from my perspective, like I did grow up a little bit, but I didn't grow up with proper representation. I didn't see Black queer mob in the media that we saw. Like I grew up watching Neighbours and Channel 7, 9 and 10. I listened to all these white people on the radio. That was my Australiana kind of media call out kind of thing. And I think I got into it, and I'm so passionate about it because I needed to see more representation.
Mm-hmm.
I was sick of being in the pool by myself. But then Mitch and a lot of other mob mentors that I've met throughout the years, like Laurrie said, we're a bubble in a bubble. But once you meet your peeps, you feel all right in that bubble. You feel comfortable, and I don't know. I find it a bit hard to step out of the bubble sometimes. I need to be my good, confident self, but then I have those unconfident days, And if someone wants to come and tell me off that day, it's not a good day for him. Like I'll snap at him, bless him, or her, whoever that person is. But that's just where I'm coming from, I guess. Slow progression, but it's getting a lot better. It's getting a lot better and a lot more inspiring these days.
Yeah. Well, you spoke about the mentorship that Mitch has provided. Mitch, is that something that you actively seek out to do, is to mentor and provide support to queer First Nation filmmakers, actors, etc.?
Absolutely. I mean, at No Coincidence Media, we do take on emerging filmmakers. B was in wardrobe department on Stephen McGregor's Servant or Slave, which I wrote and produced. And whilst, B was, you were quite young then, B, weren't you? But it was ensuring that there were opportunities for emerging filmmakers to be attached in different departments. So, in 10 years' time, we're working towards a very different looking industry. When we are looking for HODs, heads of departments, in collaboration, obviously, with the directors, we try to actively look for Indigenous filmmakers when telling Indigenous films. The same with queer. It's what we do. I think it's a part of our company culture, and within my culture, that's what we do, and it's what we've done. The latest film we shot was a good example of that, but that was a collaboration with Indigenous people in New Zealand, so Māori, Samoan, and Aboriginal on this side, and we had so many heads of department, but that was something born out of an idea from Screen Australia's Indigenous department. New Zealand Film Commission, they ensured that there was Indigenous producers on both sides of the ditch. We employed Indigenous writers on both sides, and the flow and effect just went on, and it's something that we're quite proud of. But we do that with all our projects. So yes, it is something that we do.
Great. Davey, I want to jump to you now. How important is it for you that all areas of the queer community, First Nations especially, are represented in the industry? And I'm talking about, people from remote and rural communities as well, trans people. How important is it for you to make sure that their stories are shared, but also they get opportunity to work within the industry?
It's incredibly important to me because with each new queer film or show I see or production, it breaks down a stereotype, if that makes sense. It really sort of adds to the truth of who we are. It really deepens people's understanding of how diverse we are within this small niche community. It's an opportunity to really explore, different little pockets. So to help that evolve and grow and push that along further down the pipeline is really great. Like I remember back in the day seeing something on TV like Queer as Folk, which was really cool and progressive at the time, but it's one pocket of the queer community, and so to see different shows coming out now that really explore the other moments, it helps with the mainstream, really. That it's sort of preaching to the people who don't understand us, who might take a risk and get to know us via a show. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. What I'm going to do now is obviously, queer First Nation stories are a part of the Mardi Gras Film Festival. I'd like to now just play a little video based on the slate that they've offered this year.
Dicen que son el tercer género, que no son ni hombres ni mujeres. Vamos, que son transexuales, pero que cosen.
Ay, Andresito. Qué vergüenza le darías a tu madre con todas estas cosas. Mira cómo te ves.
En este pueblo todo se confunde. Los hombres no son hombres, las mujeres no son mujeres.
Do you want to grab a drink?
Yes.
Yeah.
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 I've never kissed a girl before. Yeah, I kind of figured. What? Really? It was that obvious?
My horse racing is the love of my life. That's all I'm gonna keep thinking about.
You have to stick through with the fire and the rain,
I guess it runs through our blood. That's the way it is. I was born to do this. Ready now?
Yeah. No.
Awesome. Isn't it cool to just see some of those clips? Queer Screen, as part of Mardi Gras Film Festival, has done a really great job. I was able to go and see Wild Hood earlier in the week. What I do want to ask is, I'll ask you this, Mitch. The queer genre is something, that is one thing. Do you think that it is welcoming to queer First Nations film in general?
Most definitely. I'm dying for someone to send me a script. Give me something to produce. I'd love to sink my teeth into something, an Indigenous queer film. It comes down to, finding that diamond in the rough. And they're few and far between generally in the industry. And then looking for one that is generated from an Indigenous queer person is even harder to find. So if you're out there with an amazing script, please send it over because I'd love to do it. But yeah, there is room for it. There is room for it. But as being Laurrie and David were saying, I think the country's very late to the world stage, and just through all that, I was trying to think, when did I guess queer Indigenous characters or stories become mainstream? And the first one that comes to my head, and I'm grappling with, Maine on Neighbours. I never watched Neighbours, but I know that he was it. And then, it was, Stephen Oliver in black comedy.
Yeah.
Everyone knows him and Aaron Farzo's skit. You know what I mean? And that was not that long ago. So I feel like we're still growing, and we're very late to the world stage, and there's definitely a room for our stories and our people. So get writing, people.
Yeah, I love that. A call out from Mitch Stanley himself. Look, a lot of queer films I find are, sort of entrenched in struggle and heartbreak, and there's a lot of, sadness that comes along with this genre. How important is it that we show the flip to that? Queer love, joy, pride. I'd love you to answer that, B.
I was just getting into the question. I was like, oh, feeling it. Sorry. Oh. Wait, what was the question? No. It's just, you need it. You need those feels, like Black Mob was so intricate in how they are within themselves. There's just all these little niches that we have, whether it's a black thing or whether it's a queer thing. If it's an amalgamation of both of them, Lord help you if you're outside of that box, because you just won't understand what we're on about, to be honest. And it's just, you need it, because you need, like, Mitch is waiting for a script. I want to see more black queer content. I'm not the best writer, but I'll give it a red hot crack. But if not me, then like who? That old quote? Mm-hmm. It's like, I want to inspire these people. I think it's just so important that we just keep giving it a go, and we keep just pushing ourselves, Like, even if they don't want to hold the door open for us, I don't care. I'll boot the door down. I'll jump in the back window, whatever. Or maybe I just don't need your help. I'll just go and do it myself,
Yeah.
I want to see that kind of drive. And I see it in a lot of young people. I felt it in All My Friends Are Racist. And in some of the episodes of Black Comedy, when I saw Black Comedy and Stephen Oliver, it just got my heart racing. I'm like, I'm hungry for it. Let's do it.
I felt it as well in All My Friends Are Racist, and I want to feel that moment again. So let's play the clip.
Yes.
It's recording. Stand beside me. No, behind me. You're my black up. A couple of hours ago, my housemate Belle and I were made the victims of what I would describe as a cancellation.
Oh no! I'm not racist. You just can't go around attacking white people, Belle. They're my main customers.
This is my future. I could end up as a parliament staffer. We can't let these racists win. Let's close that gap and decolonize, sis. It is time to clap back. Move, I'm black. That's offensive. You're wearing a kimono.
Let's go enact social change.
We are some of the most oppressed people.
Very exciting that you found your passion and for it to include social justice.
This is your Reconciliation Action Plan, officer. You're all on fucking stolen land.
This is very inappropriate. I think it became inappropriate when he did the sexy kangaroo.
I have over 60,000 years of ancestors to tap into and many more followers to gain.
You got $2?
Oh! Haven't your people taken enough?
Oh, wow. Phenomenal. I mean, that is black joy at its finest, really, right there. It's such a wonderful way to sort of end this panel. But before we go, I would love just a single piece of advice from all of you, actually, for anybody sitting at home, any, queer First Nation person who wants to give this a crack, who wants to achieve, achieve something in this industry. I'll start with you, Mitch. What would you like to say to that person sitting at home?
It's a lot of hard work and commitment, but don't let that frighten you. You have to get out there. You have to, don't be shamed. One thing, exposing yourself not only to an audience, but other industry fellows, can be quite frightening. But you just have to put that foot forward. I can't imagine what Enoch was thinking. Like, kudos to him for, you know, coming up with that with All My Friends Are Racist. But that is so out there. And then, Davey, you just executed it. But it took guts and courage. And I think, was that one of his first? Can someone inform me? Was that one of his first ones?
Yeah.
That took guts and that took courage, and that's something that breaks the mold of what we're seeing in film and TV or web series at the moment. And good on him. So, you know, just get out there, get your networks happening as well. Talk to people, advertise yourself, social media. That would be my thing. And training as well. Look at opportunities through the Indigenous department at Screen Australia, and your local or your state offices. Feel big. Screen Queensland represent. But, you know, they can put you in contact with industry professionals. Obviously, they don't offer training, but they know who's doing what and what's coming about. I think the first thing I had done was I looked at what was getting filmed at a certain stage back in, I think it was the Australian Film Commission at that time. And it was a Gold Coast production. I was at acting school. I was like, I want to be an extra, and I want to be an extra. And I harassed Kylie and Rosemary. And I got on that set. You know, you just got to do it. Put yourself out there.
Yeah. That's some stellar advice, Mitch. Thanks so much. How about you, B?
Well, something my mum always told me was blackfellas have to work twice as hard to get half the recognition. And I think in the film industry, in the arts industry, I think it's definitely true, you know, but I want to say work hard and I want to say give it your all, but that's expected, you know. When you love something, you do give it your all. And if you want to make it in the arts, if you're expecting to make it in the arts, if you don't wake up with a smile on your face at 4 o'clock in the morning to be on set that's 3 hours away by 6 o'clock, it's like, what are you doing in the industry, you know? But I think my main advice is something that my uncle always said, you know, be cool, don't be a fool.
Ooh.
Look to your elders, look to your mentors, look to the people to your left and your right and the ones behind you, you know. Us mob do well when we do things together. And I think all the conversations that we've had here tonight, it's really inspiring. And I've taken a step back from film to take care of my mum these last couple of months. But I'm inspired to get back to Sydney and to get back into work, you know. I just, keep doing it with your mob. Stand strong and stand proud, I guess I'm saying.
That's deadly. And isn't it like Uncle's always swinging in with that good advice?
Yeah, man. He's the smoothest uncle I got too, I swear.
Love that. And over to you. What would you have to say to somebody watching this at home who wants to give it a crack?
Me? Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, my bad. I would say just a big fat go on then, because like, what have you got to lose, really? Just get out there, big note yourself, apply, just really make a show of it and be great. And like, I'm sorry, but today is the youngest you'll ever be again. So the clock's ticking, get moving. We want you here. We want to see you. We want to hear your stories. Come on.
Oh, that's gold, Davey. Go on then, Laurrie. What you got?
Go on then. It's so Davey. I would say fake it till you make it. I think there's this, you know, if you can see it, you can be it. Well, we've kind of shown tonight that we haven't seen it, but we've still been it. So even if you're not seeing it, jump on in there and get amongst it. When I kind of had my start, I was working for Channel 7. I was working on reality TV shows. I know, don't tell anyone. I was working like anything I could get my hands on. I was in there. It didn't matter what. I was like, I'm going to do this. And it came to a point where I had an interview. It wasn't even for a job. It was just to get advice from Screen Australia staff. It was a wonderful program out in Western Sydney that Information Cultural Exchange held. And I almost threw up on my way to go and meet them. I was that nervous. less than 2 years after that, I was working at Screen Australia and administering that program where we were working with Western Sydney filmmakers. And I have to reference that all the time because I did not think I was worth it. I did not think I was worth the time or that Screen Australia would want to hear from me. And now I'm an executive there. Like, if I can do it, y'all can do it. Trust me. So fake it till you make it. You will get there.
Oh, I love that. I love that. I really resonate with that, Laurrie. Thank you all so much for being a part of this panel. It has been so deadly having this chat. Like, there's been so much that you've shared. You've been so honest about your experience as well. So, yeah, big love to you all. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. My name is Matty Mills. I hope you enjoyed the panel this evening. Good night.